Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? So I'm making a video in my car. My girlfriend said it's really weird to make a video in your car, but hey, what the heck? I'm not bothering her right now. So yeah, I want to talk a little bit more about Basic Fantasy Role-Playing Game because I made a really short video about it, and much to my dismay, I misspoke, and it does not use racist class. I got corrected on that. But I wanted to go a little bit more in depth about the game. So I'm going to just talk about a few things. I've jotted down some notes for myself. So we'll see how this goes. First off, like the book, if you open it up, you look at the artwork, you look at the typeset, you look at the font, the whole 9 yards. It's done in such a way that just looks like the old BX book, the old basic and expert sets. Just the artwork, the layout, everything. It makes me smile every time I look at it. I mean, like this kind of ridiculous smile, and it brings me back to being 13 again. So a certain part of that is just pure unabashed nostalgia on my part, but it's just done in a way and presented in a way where it looks very, very old school. So to me, that's really, really cool. There's a really brief how to play section, like if you're a player, and one of the coolest things about it is it tells you to use a piece of paper as your character sheet, and it has this little example of what the character sheet should look like, because there's about that much stuff written on it, and that's really, really cool and really refreshing, and to me, very old school. One of the things that I've seen people say a whole bunch is about this game and some other games is that they're basically clones of the Rule Cyclopedia. They're not. If you want to see a great clone of the Rule Cyclopedia, there's something called Dark Dungeons, and maybe I'll talk about that sometime. I don't actually own a physical copy of the book. I do have the PDF. It's a really great retro clone of that. However, you know, the Rule Cyclopedia and Menser Basic, and nothing against Frank Menser or his product, it's a very complicated game. If you take Menser Basic in totality with all the sets or the Rule Cyclopedia, it's a huge game. The only thing, it's not a perfect analogy by any means, but you know, Rule Cyclopedia is to BX what second edition D&D with all the splats and all the supplements is to the original 3 core books of first edition D&D. It's huge. It's just, you know, and first edition D&D was a big monster too. But BX is this very simple game. And the Rule Cyclopedia is enormous. So Basic Fantasy Role-Playing Game is a very simple game, which is one of the reasons I like it. It uses the basics ability score modifiers. Dwarves can be clerics, fighters, or thieves. Elves can be clerics, fighters, magic users, or thieves, and they're the only classic and multi-class, so they can be fighter magic users or magic user thieves. And halflings can be clerics, fighters, or thieves. So very, very first edition-y when it comes right down to it. But all the races have a little perk. They have like a one ability they have to have a minimum in, one ability they have to have a maximum in. You could probably figure out what those are. Really simple stuff. Real basic hit dice. Fighters get D8. Clerics get D6. Thieves and magic users get D4. Never a fan of D4 thieves, but you can change it if you don't like it, just like anything else in the game. You know, one of the other things in the game is elves are the only people that they have to have D6 hit dice even if they're fighters. They can't have D8s. They can have D4s if they're magic users, though. The saving throws, as far as I can tell, are exactly the same as in BX. I didn't actually break out my copy and double check, but they're real close. The hit progression, same thing. You know, they use ascending armor class to make it more modern, but it's the same exact thing. They use the same variable weapon damage. You know, the equipment. There's an equipment list. There's a thing on vehicles and siege engines in the book. Real bare bones, but it gets you what you need to do, what you need. They got the spell section. You know, really standard spells. They're all laid out really well. And then let's see what else we got. They use 10-second rounds. That's basic for you, which is cool. I dig that a lot. The standard encumbrance list. Let's see what else. The usual, like, you know, you detect secret doors in 1 and 6, traps in 1 and 6, whatever, unless you're an elf. Opening doors is like a 1 and 6. So it's straight out of BX Basic. It has a great section on hirelings. All these sections are short, by the way. Sections on XP. And here's an interesting departure. XP is, you know, based on killing monsters. You know, very classic, but not on treasure. Using XP for treasure is listed as an optional rule, which is cool. You know, a little bit more of a modern flavor. Combat uses D6 initiative, straight out of old school. There's a departure from regular basic where the cleric uses a D20 to turn the undead. Then he rolls a 2D6 to see how many he turns. Let's see what else. There's a section on sleep, which is really cool. I can't remember if that's in the original basic, but the idea that your constitution modifier determines how much sleep you need, and if you don't sleep enough, then all of a sudden all your rolls start to suffer. It's got this whole big section on optional rules, and it's small, but it's a section on it. And there's some really cool optional rules in there. There's a whole bunch of different ways to handle death and dying, which run the gamut from making a saving throw versus death when you hit 0 hit points to using -10 like AD&D did, etc. And I'm not going to list them all, but there's a whole bunch of optional rules in there. And then they have some little section on magic items and some other DM suggestions. But that's like really the meat and potatoes. This is the longer video on Basic Fantasy Role-Playing Game. It covers all that stuff. It covers it really well. There's a few rules modifications from BX, but not many. And it's a great self-contained game. And once again, at the end of the day, I'm going to say this is a great game. But just kind of wanted to cover like what the game has inside the book. Like what will you find in the book? Pretty much everything you need, except imagination and dice. The other thing I will say, I didn't think of it at the time. If you go to their website, which is escaping me, basicfantasy.org, I think is what it is, you'll find not only the book and links to the book, because I believe they publish everything on Lulu, and you can get just about anything for $5. You'll also find links to all the stuff they make. I think there's another bestiary. There's some worlds. There's some basic modules or some other things in there. And I remember somebody else had done a video on this a while ago, but he held up like everything, and you probably could spend like $40 and get this huge bunch of stuff. They'll have you adventuring for a long time. The other neat thing that I think it was Tim, Samwise Savard RPG mentioned, which was I think it was him that mentioned it, was that if you want to start a group and spend $30, buy 6 books, and hand them out to your players. That's pretty cool. Role playing on the cheap with a great game. So yeah, Basic Fantasy Role Playing again. Once again, fantastic game, well worth the money and the luck.